Hey everyone, thank you for joining on time. We're going to let a couple more people join, but we're only going to wait 1 minute. We're just going to hop right into this. So we will be starting momentarily. Hey Daniela. Daniela, how do we sound? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Great. Okay, awesome. All right, well, we're a minute in. People are going to be joining. Everyone's going to be getting a recording, so no big deal. But for everyone's sake, I'm going to get into this. Thank you for joining. This is the Practicing Law Remotely Lessons from the Last Year and Looking Forward webinar. And just as some brief introductions, my name is Andreas Becker. I am the Director of Sales at Lawyaw. That is a picture of me pre-COVID. I'm an attorney, no longer practicing. It was actually my classmate in law school who started this company. I'm really happy he did because I really like my job and I get to meet with really interesting people like Betty and Joe, who I will let introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Andreas. And really, thank you so much for having us. It's been really fun collaborating with you on this presentation. I'm Betty Nelson, and I must be an alien because I've been working with lawyers for 41 years, and I have chosen to keep doing it. So I love it. Not sure what's wrong, what that's all about. So 41 years of experience, 21 as a litigation legal secretary, and the remaining time working in IT. And we're excited to talk to you today about what we've learned during the past year.
And my name is Joe O'Donnell. I'm a senior technical engineer at Terrapin Technology and instructor. And like Betty, I've been working in IT for longer than I like to admit. But we'll just say it's 40 years.
Come on,
and
guys.
I started when I was 7. Yeah. But yeah, super excited to be here and share some interesting stories and information with you today.
Thank you, Betty and Joe. A little bit of housekeeping. I bet we're all webinar regulars at this point. We're going to have some interactive polls during the presentation. Use the chat section to ask questions. I've got Daniela from Lawyaw who's going to be manning some of those questions. We're going to have dedicated time for Q&A at the end. If there's something particularly juicy, we'll probably jump in, but I do want to keep us on schedule. We've got an hour scheduled for the webinar. I'd like to leave 10, 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. But you know, just as a little introduction, this is not a salesy webinar at all. But for people who don't know what Lawyaw is, we are a programmable document workflow software for legal professionals. We're 5 years old. We work with 1,200 law firms across the country and in 5 actually different countries. We've generated over 1.3 million documents and over 300,000 e-signatures filed with the courts. So just a little bit of background in terms of where we're coming from. I talk with thousands of attorneys each year. So I have a good amount of context, but like I said, I really like to be able to work with consultants like Betty and Joe, and they will introduce Terrapin.
Yeah, Terrapin, we're a unique company. Like Lawyaw, we really pride ourselves on taking personal interest. And most of our staff have all worked internal IT at law firms before. So we enjoy working with professional organizations and people. We have certified engineers for all kinds of things under the sun for IT. But specifically, Betty and I love working with companies, specifically law firms, because that's where our forte is at, to help you with your workflow and application support and development and training. So among other things, with our litigation support and forensic e-discovery, gosh, the list goes on. But we are here to offer that advice and help you out.
And really happy to have both of them here. The agenda we're going to do just a little bit of a year in review. You've probably caught a couple of webinars because it's a popular topic, but we're really going to focus in on, what we learned from this past year and how that's going to inform some best practices for the years to come. And Betty and Joe, with all their experience, are kind enough to join us and give some, actual examples based on all the work that they've done in the past year. So then we'll do the looking ahead, and then again the Q&A at the end. But let's just jump right into it. So, working remote, the year in review, and man, a whole lot can change in a year. I want to keep this light, but yeah, it's been a tough year for everyone, and the legal industry in particular. The transitions and the adaptations that have been required of us, they may have felt a little bit more extreme. Everything happened really quickly, it felt like, and maybe a little bit more foreign than in other industries because of how, I don't know if reticence is the right word, but it's just, the field of law, we don't adopt new technologies quite as quickly as some other industries. And some of that reticence, it's kind of well-founded because there maybe historically haven't been good technology solutions to serve these people. And it's been a constant, headline. And this poor guy, the lawyer cat, there's been no shortage of reminders. But, this gradual shift we've been witnessing over the last couple of years, it's certainly been accelerated in this past year. And I'm sure Betty and Joe can speak to a little bit of that in terms of the trends that they're seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons it's been difficult for law firms to adapt to the drastic change we faced a year ago is that, they have a recipe for how it works. Support staff comes in at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. Attorneys trickle in. Yes, they're communicating because they are using technology, but they ended up in the same place all day, every day, for the most part, interacting. They had a workflow, and that was completely disturbed a year ago.
Yeah, and even the travel that was involved with a lot of them, where they would travel to particular locations and hold their depositions or the litigation cases or whatnot. They were accustomed to that type of atmosphere, going on site, meeting face to face, shaking hands, and talking with people. And almost overnight, that all changed.
It changed significantly, and there's been no shortage of challenges. But I think as we got a little bit deeper into things, as it turns out, a lot of people have embraced and maybe even enjoyed the flexibility to some extent. There are a lot of Facebook pages and LinkedIn pages that I follow. And one of them, I'll include those in the resources that follow from this webinar. One's Attorney on the Beach, one is Maximum Lawyer, and it's a lot of solos and smaller law firms that share advice on different technology tips and trends that they're seeing. And I'm seeing tons of posts saying, oh my God, we have to go back to the office. What do we do? Or they're getting a job offer from a big firm and they say, I don't want to do it because they're going to make me come back into the office. And that doesn't mean that there isn't anything lost from that office environment, but that flexibility has been really valuable to a lot of people now that they've adapted to it.
I couldn't agree more. And just since I was in the support staff field, I can really speak to the fact that not only were you not allowed to work from home, and a lot of that is due to labor laws in whatever state you reside in, California being particularly difficult to deal with, but not only labor laws, but your attorneys and your firm wanted you there. That was the whole purpose. So this was a huge shift for support staff. And I can tell you that most of the people I've been talking with have chosen to maintain a hybrid status moving forward. And they're just waiting to hear what their firms are going to be requesting of them in the next few years. And they're definitely hoping for the opportunity to work at least part-time from home.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there's been, as everyone was kind of forced into that, where they had thought about it before, but didn't give it much consideration, with opposed to maybe their office space or their infrastructure IT wise to be able to support that. This changed everything. And now they're rethinking all of those things that they had kind of pushed to the side or sometimes weren't really prepared for, but now are asking those questions and reanalyzing all of it.
Yeah, and back to that idea of just accelerating things. What's happening, it's not unique to just a global pandemic. People, like you both were saying, people are considering, do I need as big as an office space? Do I, how do I attract the best talent? Do I need to find a paralegal with this experience in this locality, or can I go to another state potentially or another county and find someone? If I do, are the technology solutions there, is the infrastructure in there, are the processes in place to allow me to do that successfully? So it surfaced a lot of important considerations because, in general, everyone's had to adapt to this remote environment. Lawyaw, we were built to be a remote company, but that means tons of Zoom meetings, lots of Slack, a lot of internal understanding about, we have this concept of assumption of best intentions. We have to talk quickly, but everyone loves each other, and we're just direct in what we ask of people and what we expect. But there are some very specific considerations outside of just the general ones that law practices and businesses have to take into account.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say absolutely. I think that's the real issue is many of them had not because they didn't want to, but there was no real impetus to do it. They would look at other offices and say, well, when the clients go to my office or when they go here, I want to have a place that looks like that or is designed like that. And so that was, perpetuating what had always been.
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in and say I'm a good example of loving remote work. I worked lived in California till 6 years ago when I moved to the mid-coast of Maine, and I still work for a California IT company. I work remotely every day. That was pre-pandemic, and I love it. So for me, I could never have a similar position where I live in a tiny lobster fishing village in Maine. And I do think we're entering an era where you can live where you want and also work where you want, and they don't need to be in the same location.
And it's absolutely as picturesque as you can imagine, as she just described that.
It is.
That concept, the Lawyers on the Beach group, it's run by Regina Edwards, who's a family law attorney out in Georgia. And I'll send a link, and if people want invites to the group, I'd highly recommend joining it because there's tons of nuggets of information, and it's all about people. They literally just send pictures of themselves on the beach with a laptop. And obviously you want to totally disconnect sometimes, but the ability to run a practice remotely and live whatever life it is that you wanted to kind of on your terms is available if planning is done correctly and you're implementing the right solutions and processes. Right. So, and this thing, oh, sorry, what were you going to say, Betty?
No, it's exciting because I kept thinking, what will I not be able to do now that I'm in Maine? One of my passions is creating demonstrative evidence, working really closely with a trial team right up to the very moment they walk in front of the judge for opening statement. I create their opening statement, their demonstrative evidence. And in all honesty, it's actually been easier being remote. The time difference has been, a wonderful thing. They finish working at midnight. I get up while they're still asleep. I get everything done. So sometimes we just have to look for the pluses instead of focusing on the minuses.
That is such a good attitude, Betty.
Thanks.
And it's, there's the long-term considerations as well. Many in the pandemic were forced into working by remote. And so some of the, they took some of the shortcuts to make things happen. But now as things are evolving and they're rethinking these things, they're thinking more long-term. So what does that mean in terms of, the security of our files and the computers? What types of options do we use to communicate? And that could be your traditional phone system. Are you rethinking that? Or, using the newer technologies like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and et cetera. And then how do you all interact by working remote when you're not face-to-face anymore? So those things coupled with the ability to do all of this from any location, it really does open up the door to some pretty significant changes that are pretty awesome for law firms.
And what I say is that it's really valuable having professionals like Betty and Joe to call upon. One thing, they teach you how to pass the bar in law school, but you really learn how to be a business owner on the job. And there's so many considerations. There are a lot of cool tools. I was just thinking about this workflow tool called Miro, and I'll put a link to that as well. It's very simple to use, but it's kind of like a virtual whiteboard. There are all these considerations which we're about to get into that may seem overwhelming. I'm a very visual person, and really just kind of a little bit of planning and thinking out can go a long way, but leveraging people like Betty and Joe is invaluable. And I imagine that you've had a lot of inquiries over the last year about how to make this transition well.
We were very busy. The entire Terrapin team, the first month, of course, March of 2020 was like none other, because we were helping firms get set up to work remotely. And while attorneys often had the proper equipment at home because they had laptops and traveled, their support staff didn't. So there was a huge scramble to get everyone set up with equipment. Quickly following was, the scarcity of equipment. If anyone tried to buy a home printer last year, you know what I'm talking about, or a webcam for that matter. It got a little crazy along with the prices. But all that aside, there are some really interesting considerations to talk about moving forward. Instead of focusing on last year, now we know we can work remotely. First question is, do you want to continue to work remotely? And then there's a lot of things to consider when making that decision. Who else is going back, right? Who's going to be in the office? Yeah.
Excellent segue. And these were some thoughtful questions that you had put down, and you really need to dig into these, because some of these can be very, they kind of fall into different buckets. Some are, just a general, happiness and quality of life. Some are more economic based in terms of the practice itself. Some are career oriented in terms of the specific person. And, personal. For some people, the commute and everything, it was very difficult, and was a drag on them. For a lot of people, being in the office was something of a release, and I try and find time to go for a walk or get out of the my room every once in a while, because it's hard to separate the two. But these were some thoughtful questions that you laid out, Betty.
Yeah, and they are important moving forward. These considerations are, but you're absolutely right. I know a lot of working moms felt like they were a better mom because they went into the office and had a bit of a break from their parenting duties. Same with dads. I know dads now that tell me they're working starting at 4:30 in the morning because the kids get up at 6. There's just a lot going on, and I miss my commute, I have to admit. So now when I'm just goofing around on the computer and my significant other says, "How much more work do you have?" I say, "I'm on my commute and I'll be home in about 15 minutes. And that works for me.
That's so good. Yeah, we were talking about this. I had mentioned because I work by remote as well. I work out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And, before, when I would go and visit clients, I used the term windshield time. That was what I used to kind of disconnect and decompress between clients and, whatever that might be. But now I don't have that. And my family will say the same thing. It's like, well, why are you working so long? Well, I was only working between this and that. They're like, yeah, but you were in your office or you were on your computer. I know it's connected to my hip.
Well, you were calling it mow the grass time instead of
yes. No, it's
time.
True. Absolutely. When I'll take breaks, I'll actually leave the house. I'll walk outside and I'll go mow a patch of grass.
Yeah.
So
that's what you do.
We have this artificial grass in our backyard. I'm in San Francisco, and I just go outside and I pace, and I kind of if I don't want to walk around the block, and I've actually started to wear kind of a pattern in the artificial grass, which they only put in like 2 months ago. I just walk around the corners of it, but yeah, you need some time just away from your house or your room or what have you to get out, and people forget to do that. On a daily basis, weekly basis, what have you. But a lot of these things have to do with, people are concerned about the relationships they're building. Are they missing out on, not just water cooler talk, but the stuff that, doesn't get surfaced in a Slack or a Teams call, or that isn't discussed in, your Zoom stand-up or what have you. So definitely a lot of important considerations to take into account now that, fingers crossed, hopefully later this year, we're going to start seeing more people at least having the option or it being safe or considered safe to go back to the office.
Yes.
And so that kind of leads into, this next slide and how much more, there's a cost benefit to all of this. And the big one is, I was going back to how thoughtful, everyone at Lawyaw has to be about people's time and communications and how those things are interpreted. And there's so much more digital information being communicated and transferred to people, and certain things are lost in terms of context. But I mean, these numbers kind of speak to it.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're really, we were talking about this when we were putting together a presentation, that we've never really done well at organizing electronic communication. I mean, we did a webinar recently on wrangling email, and that word is really true to the fact, because most of us, we deal with our email and other electronic communication, but we don't necessarily, I would say for the most part, most of us don't really manage it. Unless you consider managing just kicking it off into another folder somewhere, so you don't have to look at it, or because your mailbox is getting, your particular inbox is getting so big that searching it, you just get the spinning wheel of death when you're in Microsoft Outlook looking for stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have tried to use other means of communication. If you don't need a paper trail, try to get out of Outlook. It's wonderful if you need a paper trail, you're working on client matters. Of course, it's important. Anything substantive with your firm is important. But if you're just asking a quick question, try to get out of Outlook and find a way to communicate that doesn't leave something for you to file or delete, etc. Another thing I'm doing a lot this year, since I have limited workspace, I no longer am sitting in an office with a desk, I drag emails to my calendar regularly, and that takes all the information in my email, creates a calendar invite. You can do the same thing with tasks. If you're a task person, I kind of hang out in my calendar, and then I have the item with all the information. I kind of give myself a deadline to get it done the next day, and with the beauty of the Outlook reminder, I can say, I'll do that in 2 hours, but it does get done, and I'm not dealing with a legal pad of lists. So that's one of my little tricks that I use that helps me stay organized.
You can do that in Outlook? Can you do that in Oh man, that is.
Yeah.
Can you do that in Gmail?
I don't know, Andrea.
So
cool. I haven't tried it in Gmail.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have Gmail associated with Outlook, you could, but I haven't tried the other way around.
You don't do it with the email open. You do it while it's sitting closed in your list, and you just put your cursor on it and drag it to the calendar icon, and bam, it starts a calendar invite. So if you're talking about someone about getting together, you have your directions, you have all sorts of information. And if it's for an online meeting, then I open that calendar event and I type my notes in it and save it back to Outlook. So, it's
that's
pretty
interesting.
Yeah.
You didn't mention this in our outline. All right, well, I'm going to need to get with you after this.
I wanted to save a surprise for the presentation.
You saved it. Another thing that I thought was really important, we're like halfway through, and so we've got more slides to get through, but I thought was really important is there's all of this increased communication, but with some of these new technology solutions and tools and processes, a lot of that falls on the support staff, and it's not really built into their work description or their paycheck or their expectations. And I think it's really important for everyone here and attorneys and staff and everyone to keep in mind how to manage that correctly and reset expectations in terms of their increased responsibilities. If you want to have more transparency and fluidity in the office while you're working remotely, definitely take account of that and don't just kind of take that for granted, because that is one thing that I'm seeing a lot of when we sign up new people. I try and have a very detailed action plan as to who's going to own what processes and make that manageable, because it's something that a lot of practices haven't had to deal with. I start pinging Tucker, our CEO, probably 5 to 10 times a day, and then I delete it. And I just make a list of all the things I want to ask him, but I know that he's in 10 different meetings,
right? And
I can't ask him all this stuff, and I want to ask him all at once. Even if I feel like it's urgent, it may not be urgent.
That's such a good point. And I can tell you, my support staff friends, it is a year, it's been a bit of overwhelm. Been a bit much for everyone because if you worked at a firm that didn't completely embrace technology, all of a sudden you're embracing technology and you're not sitting in the office in your training room, if you have the luxury to have a training room, with your IT team right over your shoulder helping you. We all kind of had to figure this out at home alone. So that's a great point of being cognizant of the stress, the increased stress and demands on people and what they're capable of.
It is.
Yeah.
And I was thinking too, and taking the time to do it. You had mentioned about that. It's not really in their job description, yet everyone is having to learn to use these things. Has anyone given them permission to do that? Yeah, they have to use these tools, but they still have to get all their other work done. So finding the time to do this, honestly, it's usually they're bumping and skinning themselves along the way to learn these technologies, the rough way. So having permission, letting them know, hey, you have permission to take some time. I know this may take away from your billable time or your admin time, but it's okay to take time to learn this, or have someone learn it and then share it with others in the office is helpful. Yeah. It may be a known thing, but actually, verbally telling them and giving them permission goes a long way to reduce the anxiety about learning a new technology.
Yeah, as an attorney, assumptions were what I was paid not to do. So I think it's always good to verbally communicate. I think it's a good leadership skill. I mean, there's IQ, but this concept of EQ, emotional intelligence, and it also kind of bleeds into business intelligence because if you are giving your team the tools and this time and the space and the permission to learn things the right way and have it communicated correctly from the outset, it's going to save you a ton of time down the line. So we're at our first poll, which I will publish, and you can have multiple different answers if you'd like, but we're always interested, like, what has been most impactful? It's different for different people in the same office, depending on where they live, depending on the practice area, depending on the sophistication of the tools they're using, their family structure, what have you. But I like to keep this interactive. And that'll stay up for a little while. But what we'd like to move into is how can this last year inform best practices looking ahead, and particularly what can Betty and Joe offer in terms of all the experience they have, guiding law firms, and what things that should be taken into account. Again, speaking specifically to taking time to plan and think things out instead of just rushing into things.
Well, that's something that has changed for Joe and I this year, and we've had law firms consult with us as a team just to help them make changes. And so, for instance, some firms like to stay about a year behind the current technology. I think that's wise. Wait and kind of see how things go with big upgrades, et cetera, et cetera. But some firms, for a variety of reasons, have chosen not to move forward at all. Maybe they're using a time and billing system that was developed in the 80s. That happens. And now all of a sudden, everyone's working remotely. They've got to upgrade. So we're seeing a lot of these types of discussions. And we just want to remind everyone, as you're making these decisions, to be inclusive within your firm. Don't sit down with the firm administrator, the executive director, and the managing partner and make a decision. If possible, please include people from all aspects of your firm, specifically the people who will be using this technology the most. You will just have a much better outcome at the end of your project. You will see a whole different level of buy-in, and people will actually use the product and, not complain about it if they're part of the process making the decision.
That's absolutely right. The acceptance level of having that type of inclusive nature of whatever it is you're deploying or changing or putting into practice, it makes a huge impact in how efficient and really how happy everyone's going to be with the decision or the technology or the workflow.
Right. And about this specific topic, new partnerships, what 2020 taught me is that I stopped thinking of vendors as vendors. I soon realized which of these vendors were strategic partners for me and my clients. And I like to stay agnostic with software. I don't like talking to my clients about software solutions where our firm gets paid a percentage of money if they make that selection. I prefer to just be honest with my opinion and keep money out of the mix. And I know people really appreciated that in the last year. And I feel the same way about other vendors. And in fact, the reason I met Andreas is that I sought out Andreas. Um, because I was looking for this type of technology that was so important for my clients and customers, which was to be able to create judicial counsel forms in a web-based environment. And last year, we saw a lot of growth in that area. Lots of vendors
Hmm.
stepping up and making changes to help accommodate the situation we found ourselves in.
And that came out of you work with your clients, you see a need, and then when you identify something that works with that, you get excited about being able to share that with them to help them satisfy that need or have something more efficient.
Absolutely.
And I think anyone on this webinar or viewing this, you really should be seeking out vendors or solutions providers that you see as strategic partners. I am not a typical sales guy. I'm an attorney turned tech guy, and I happen to like doing this, but I try and pride myself on being really objective. And I had a call this morning, and someone who's going to use our tool, they were talking to another practice management tool that they were moving to, and we don't integrate with them yet. And they said, oh, we were told you integrate, and then we learned that you don't, and they're still going to use us. But they were very disappointed in the level of just kind of domain. I won't even call it expertise. I would just say general knowledge. And you should challenge the people that you talk with. I think we're all, I take a lot of time out of my day to do meetings and present and really dig into people's problems. So if you're not going to make a meeting, let them know. But aside from that, you should, if they're asking you questions, they're doing a good job of that sales process because they want to know what's going on with your specific practice. There can be two practices they can be right next door to each other, same practice area, same size, that can have vastly different problems and end goals. And if someone wants to ask you a lot of questions, let them do that. I mean, everyone's got a schedule, but let them do that. They're trying to assess things and give you, diagnose whether they're a good fit.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
they're doing their due diligence. And I can tell you, back when I was the IT manager at a large law firm, I like to think of software as the last thing we talked about when we had a problem. And the first thing I said is, do we have something on the desktop that we're underutilizing? Do we already
Hmm.
have something we're not using? And if we're not using it, why? Because attorneys will go to bar association meetings or conferences and talk to their friends and come back and almost demand that a law firm will purchase a new software because they heard such great things about it. But I really encourage people to think about the situation and look at it from all sides, and then start looking at software as the second phase of that
I, I
decision.
would I would totally agree with that. There were many a times when I worked as a training manager at a law firm before that I would be given, hey, we're getting this new software. And you're like, where did this come from? And you find out what they're wanting to use it for. And as a training manager, you're like, well, you could already do this, but they had already been sold on another piece of software. So you just kept getting software thrown at all these problems. And before you knew it, you had software for, I mean, just all kinds of things. And then you had all the subscriptions and maintenance costs that came with it.
Yeah.
It didn't make anything better, honestly. It actually made it more complex.
Well, that's what's exciting to me about cloud-based computing, because you're not necessarily putting more things on your desktop when you start your computer up in the morning, but you have access to them. And this year, in all honesty, I had so many clients with the need for something like what Lawyer was offering. And then when they added in the digital signature feature, it was just like a done deal for everyone. That sounded amazing, especially for family law practices where your clients have to sign a lot of forms and documents. So we've just been, as providers and partners with our customers who are law firms, we've just been looking for similar solutions that will just help them through the pain points they encountered this last year.
Right. Not where it was just throwing software to solution, but it
Right.
really simplified a whole process
Correct.
or workflow.
Yep.
Software should support the solution, but it should not guide process. Did you ever see, did Joe or Betty, do you ever see the Simon Sinek, the Golden Rule, that TED Talk, the Start with Why? I'll include that in the follow-up materials as well. But it's like this golden circle, and it's, the what is the third circle. And it's the outer circle, and it says, every company can tell you what they do. And then the inner circle, the first inner circle, is the how. And some, tools, or this applies to any business, they tell you how they're going to do it. The best ones are the ones that start with why they're trying to solve a problem, and then they move kind of outward from there. I'm going to include that because it's something that I use in pretty much all of my decision making, whether it's personal or business related. But I won't get us too off topic, but it's such a good clip.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So rules and regulations, Betty, I know that you've kind of done a lot of work here.
Tons.
I have, because our clients needed that work, and what a change, Yes, there was electronic filing, and certain courts definitely had electronic access to records, but not all courts. So it has been a big change. It's interesting when you watch some of the funnier clips that went viral this year. One that
which
most
ones?
of us. Oh yeah, I know.
I am not a cat.
Wait, which ones?
No, I'm thinking of the cat one, but the reason I'm thinking of it is because the judge knew how to tell the attorney how to turn off the filter, right?
He totally did. He's like, that was very quick of him. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but he knew you have the cat filter on.
Correct. My point is, a year ago, it would be far-fetched to think that a judge would know what that was, and also far-fetched that they would know how to resolve the situation. That's what this last year did for us. It took us out of our comfort zone and took us into a different place. And what's so interesting is that a lot of judges feel so many appearances that were done by phone, telephonic appearances, maybe about a discovery dispute, something of that nature. They're doing it now via Zoom or Teams, a meeting where they can see each other. And the judges are saying they prefer that and plan on using that into the future. So I do believe things are going to change. I do believe courts are realizing that not only are they able to save money in operations, but so are law firms when they eliminate some of this travel. I think, depositions being taken virtually are quite fascinating. The documents right in front of you on the side of your screen, everything's being videotaped and recorded. There are a lot of changes.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
My dad, he's still practicing, and he had a mediation back in June. And I just called him up randomly, and he says, "Oh, I'm doing my first mediation via Zoom tomorrow." And my heart stopped. I was like, have you downloaded Zoom? He's like, "I think so." And I was like, "Get off the phone with me right now and call your IT person." like he just, he was using WordPerfect until I demanded that he move to Microsoft Word. But people they're seeing the convenience, although there might be a false sense of security. Like all these technology providers have made it very easy to use, but there's still, I told them, call your IT guy immediately.
Yeah.
I'm getting off the phone with you right now. Make sure that's
and that's, that's common. And one of the things that we've seen as a result of that is that we've spent time, or getting requests, I should say, from our clients. Hey, can you provide training for Zoom or Microsoft Teams for our expert witness or for our client? They're going to be involved in this deposition or providing this. So we'll give them training. We'll even do a practice session, give them tips on, so if this happens, how to change that, throw that scenario out at them and see how they handle it. And that way they're prepared, you know. So if, let's say, the cat filter does somehow get turned on, they know how to fix it. You know, they know the camera controls. Yeah, none of this would be foreign to them.
Right.
And it's not rocket science or take a long time. They just have to know where to go and what to do. And
right.
those little things go a long way.
They do. And we've been talking about the practical aspects of these changes, but really talking to rules and regulations. If you visit, say, you live in Sacramento County, and that's your Superior Court where your firm practices the most. If you were to go to the Sacramento Superior Court and look at their list of emergency orders, there's a new one every week because everything's constantly changing, right? The counties go in and out of these levels of shutdown, and then that affects how the court's interacting with litigants and counsel. So I'm a fan of electing someone in your office, whether, whether it's a support staff task or something an attorney needs to do, but elect someone to stay on top of this stuff. So not everyone is wasting their time going to the court website or going to the state bar website. I also really want to emphasize there's a lot of information and orders coming out of the state bar, and it's just worth looking at. They're releasing new orders about electronic signatures, about how to proceed with cloud computing. And it's a good reminder that ethically, attorneys are required, at least in California, to understand the technology they're using. And I think they could get away without embracing it maybe 2 years ago, but starting last year and moving forward, I think it's time where they really do need to understand how it works, specifically the software they're using in their firm, and, make sure they're getting training for what's coming.
Yeah, I think
it's easy to miss it.
I think California became the 39th state recently to pass those minimum kind of tech fluency laws. And it's really interesting. We provide like the immigration forms, and they change constantly. So we're having to update those daily sometimes without a lot of notice. E-signatures, they made a provision to allow for e-signatures for the USCIS form. So that there is some responsiveness from the courts, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some level of responsibility, like Betty was talking about, to maybe elect someone or have some process to stay abreast of these changing circumstances and laws in certain cases.
Yeah, when I was the head of IT at a large law firm, I realized some of the more senior partners weren't really thrilled with the e-discovery changes that took place, now 12 years ago. 2009. So I went to the executive director and I said, I think this is a really important thing. Let's start a committee. Let's have a partner, a techie partner, and some strong litigation associates. And then they started giving continuing legal education presentations to the rest of the litigators and the support staff. And it really took the fear out of e-discovery, and it made sure we were doing things right. And so I think embracing the changes we're seeing now in a similar fashion would be really beneficial to a law firm.
And I'm gonna sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say that it's, having the small changes and staying on top of things is so much easier than putting it off until a point where you're forced to do it and you're so far behind that it really does have a major impact on how you're working. So baby steps, stay on top of it, stay in compliance.
Baby steps. So I want to leave some time for Q&A at the end, but we'll go through some tools and processes that, Betty and Joe, you can really speak strongly to. You already gave us a couple of nuggets about how to use Outlook really well, but let's talk about some of, some remote access options.
Yeah, we've seen the technology all over the place. For a lot of firms, some of them had remote accessibility built into their infrastructure, so they're able to take advantage of a terminal server or what's called Microsoft Remote Desktop, so that they could remote into a server to do that, or configure it. Maybe they had one of those, but it wasn't configured to have all their employees use it at the same time. But you can still use that as a secure gateway to remote into the desktops in your office. For our clients that did not have that type of infrastructure, then using something like LogMeIn or GoToMyPC or something from VMware or Citrix even to remote into a desktop directly, but having a secure way with two-factor authentication to be able to access your computers while you're out of the office was a game changer for most everybody. An unexpected expense, but not as expensive as implementing a whole new server.
Right. And I don't want to sound like a Microsoft advertisement, but they already have, we had Office 365. Then, of course, they changed the name right when COVID started to Microsoft 365. But the truth of the matter is firms that had already adopted this technology kind of had a head start on especially interacting and communicating, leveraging Microsoft Teams, using OneDrive. We see a lot of small firms that don't have any servers any longer, and they are putting their documents in the cloud and using SharePoint and OneDrive. So this is all a great option for a lot of firms.
And it was a consideration primarily because it was taking advantage of something they already had. So there, in a lot of cases, there was nothing else to purchase. It was just learning how to utilize it.
Yeah.
And we see a ton of people are trying to move off premises and get rid of their server, and either something they put, a judicial council form tool or a templating tool they put on a server is like the last thing that they have on there. And so they understand it. But a lot of people who, maybe it wasn't driven so much by going off premises, but they didn't realize the server costs and the upkeep that kind of gets hidden away. You don't bundle that into your software costs. You just think of that as an operational kind of sunk cost. Right. But getting rid of that server it gets rid of a lot of headaches in terms of inefficiencies, but as a cost center, it's something that very often gets swept under the rug.
It
is. Yeah. One of the other things that is forgotten about many a times when companies will move their infrastructure to the cloud in one way or the other, especially moving email to Microsoft 365, they assume that information is backed up by Microsoft, and it's not. So a lot of times we find clients that we'll begin working with, and they have 365 by Microsoft, but they don't have any backup of it. So consider enabling two-factor authentication and get some type of backup. It's not very cost prohibitive to do it, to back that information up.
And, we've already talked about Teams, but again, it has been a game changer. And with all the money Microsoft has, they've thrown so much money to keep improving, especially the meeting features. But it has chat features. It has, Joe and I share all our marketing files and different types of files there. You can collaborate. I can remember my attorneys 10 years ago saying, is there software where multiple people can be working in a document at the same time and we can see each other's changes? And I said, are you crazy? You can do that in Teams. You can do that in Teams. If you're working on a document in Teams, I can see when Joe's making a change. Joe can see when I'm making a change. But one of my favorite things to get used to using Teams, because I didn't jump on like with a happy face at first, I was really stuck in my little world, is that you can start your Teams meeting in Outlook. You start your invite in Outlook, and as soon as you invite someone, if you're using off Microsoft 365 and you have Teams in your organization, the minute you put someone in the invite slot, there is a new icon on your toolbar that says Teams meeting. The minute you click that, Teams takes care of everything and puts all the Teams meeting information in your invite once you send it. And that's what got me used to creating Teams meetings. And I never looked back.
Right, because Outlook is really the bread and butter of most of the firms we work with. So not having to really learn a new application was a big plus for utilizing, again, something they already had, but helping to lessen the learning curve from going from Microsoft Outlook. Now I have to learn something new. No, there's just a link in it. No PIN numbers, anything like that to enter in. It'll just work. And plus, everything you do is available offline. So it's not only when you're in a meeting, but also when you're done with the meeting, it's all still there.
Yeah.
And a couple other useful tools. A little plug for us there, but a couple other ones that Joe and Betty can speak to. I can speak to Lawyaw, but like I said, I'm not going to make this salesy. I can include some stuff in a follow-up email. But
well, Andreas, what's so funny is that you just said you see a lot of people wanting to get rid of their servers and stop using on-premises solutions. Agreed. And the very last thing for everyone that they couldn't figure out how to deal with was how they were going to handle their judicial council forms. And that's when I came looking for you and I found you. So you made me look like a hero in my own little world. And I probably never thanked you for that properly. But these are some of the tools.
You can hear the cheers in the background.
This will do.
These are some of the tools we rely on. I'm only going to talk. I hate, I don't like giving certain companies a plug, but one reason Adobe is up there is because if anyone's, moved to Adobe Teams, which is a super easy way to manage your Adobe licensing for your firm and reassign licenses. What I love about it now that we're dealing with working remotely is not only can you download your desktop application, but those applications are available to you via the web. So you can do your work even if you're not at your own personal computer in your own personal comfort zone. So that's why I added Adobe. And the others are kind of self-explanatory, right? You need a way to share files securely. Citrix ShareFile is a good one. They've added in Write Signature now for an added cost, of course. And then DocuSign's been around a long time. We've all have friends who have finished a real estate deal while sitting on a beach. Thank you, DocuSign. So
one thing to keep in mind, if you are using any of these technologies or one that we don't have mentioned, I know a lot of people have used Box.com or Dropbox. Make sure you're not using the free version of these tools, because that's a no-no. You want to make sure you have a purchased business license with these programs, and also that you have a BAA agreement signed with them to maintain confidentiality, and that none of your information is shared to help protect your confidential information, whether that's with HIPAA or if you have PHI or something with the SEC and financial documentation. Please keep that in mind. That's been a thing that we come across frequently that scares us.
That is a big one. We are running a little bit over, but we're fine. Real quick, what's the piece of advice? Like this is what I want from you, Joe and Betty, in a couple of minutes.
I'll give one that came from our wrangling email one that was real popular. 4 key things. One, helping to manage your communication. When you have emails, see each of those emails as an individual action item. So something that you're either, I'm going to do something with it, I'm going to schedule it, I'm going to file it, I'm going to delete it. And then use an alternative form of communication like Teams or Slack or something like that for your everyday communication. Betty had mentioned this, where you don't need a record or a paper trail to keep track of it. And then utilize some type of management system to organize things in a single location. That could be a document management system for that type of communication. That way everyone doesn't have to keep their own individual silo of files and send copies to everybody. And then, and Betty keyed on this again too, use your calendar and other services to turn those communication items into action items right into your calendar or a task list. I would say those are the key takeaways.
Yeah, and those are huge to help us keep on track every single day. My biggest piece of advice would be to make sure you're being inclusive with your support staff, your paralegals, your legal secretaries, and beyond as you're making decisions moving forward. They often don't have a voice, and yet they're the ones who are sometimes affected the most by the decisions that are made in a law firm. So I would just make sure that they're included. I had great success doing that when I was working directly in a law firm, and I would just continue to advise that for everyone.
Yeah, get the buy-in by those who are in the trenches, right?
Get the buy-in. And one more, I guess we've got 2 more polls that I'll publish, and that's actually in the polls section. There is a separate polls section by questions. The next one is, are you going to be working? How do you anticipate you're going to be working? And you may not know, but good to get a sense of how people think they're going to be working. And I'll publish one more. If you'd like to receive some follow-up materials just regarding the content that we discussed, it won't be spammy. Don't worry about it. But we'd like people to be able to opt in if they want to. But I think I'm clapping my hands together. I think that's it.
It is it.
That was the cliff notes of our long discussions.
Yeah, that was a quick hour. I'm going to stay online. If there are any questions that people have, I would really encourage people to ask them. Or our information is here. You can email me. You can email info@terrapintechnology.com. But I'm hoping that this was good fodder for just thinking a little bit more about what's coming in this coming year, and thinking about working remotely a little bit more strategically, as opposed to in a panicked rush to accommodate a global pandemic. It's a positive way to end the webinar, right?
Absolutely.
And Betty and Joe, thank you so much we should do this again.
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
welcome. Thanks for including us. This was it was very enjoyable.
I hope I did a decent job facilitating.
Oh, you did a great job, Andreas.
Okay.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you. And thank you everyone else for attending or watching this recording. And like I said, I'll stay online. And if anyone has any questions, please pop them into the chat or the questions section, and I'd be happy to address them. But hoping this was helpful.
Thanks again.
I'll turn off my camera.